Good afternoon, everyone. Today, I am going to discuss about international environmental law. What is international environmental law? It is the branch of public international law comprising of those substantive, procedural, and institutional rules which have as their primary objective the protection of the environment. The term environment is understood encompassing both the creatures and products of the natural world and those of human civilization. So, sa madaling sabi, ang international environmental law, it is a law that is established or it is enforced the country or in organization that is aimed to provide protection for the environment. So, mostly, dito sa Philippines, one of the government bodies that regulates the environmental laws is yung mga nagpapatupad ng mga ordinances ay yung mga local government. But there is a specific sector in the government which is the DENR. When we say environment, it is the surrounding or condition in which a person, animals, plant lives or operates the natural world as a whole or in a particular geographical area, especially as affected by human activity. Dito nakapaloob yung mga nilalang or human being na sinasabi at mga produkto ng ating mundo, gaya ng mga food, water, material for shelter, and even natural cycle such as climate and nutrients. Also, international environmental law is a set of agreements and principles that reflects the world collective effort to manage or solving our most serious environmental problems. So now, let's proceed to essential environmental principles. Principles of good neighbor lines. States have, in accordance with the Charter of the United Nations, the principle of international law, the sovereign right to exploit their own resources pursuant to their own environmental policies, and they're responsible to ensure that activities within their jurisdiction or the control do not cause damage to the environment of other states or areas beyond the limits national jurisdiction. 1972 Stockholm Declaration on the Human Environment, Principle 21. It talks about sa mga neighbor countries or sa mga neighbor states. For example, ako, gusto ko mabawasan yung basura ko sa bahay. Therefore, magsusunog ako ng basura. During that process, hindi lang naman ako ang maapektuhan doon, pati yung mga kapitbahay ko. So, thus they agree na magsunog ako kasi syempre, maapektuhan din sila. Or if they doesn't agree, then I shouldn't do what I want to do. The term naman ng countries, for example, yung China and dito sa Philippines, they have to mind na yung mga pangingisda nila or pagdadaong nila ng mga barko sa West Philippine Sea. Of course, before they going to do that, they ask permission dito sa state natin, which is the government natin. But sadly, hindi ginagawa yun ng mga China dito sa atin. So, nawawala yung principle ng good neighbor lines dito sa atin. Second, principle of sustainable development. It is the development that meets the needs of the present without compromising the ability of the future generations to meet their own needs. Our common 108 future UN document A 42427. Sustainable development, it means to take the economic benefit which can help to raise the living standard of the present generation without affecting the need for future generation. Ito yung mga kinakailangan natin sa hinaharap gaya ng conservation of ecosystem, conservation of biodiversity, population control, and so on and so forth. Third, environmental impact assessment principle. Environmental impact assessment as a national instrument shall be undertaken for proposed activities that are likely to have significant adverse impact on the environment and are subject to a decision of a competent national authority. 1992 Rio Declaration on Environment and Development, Principle 17. Environment impact assessment is to promote safe environments and sustainable development by measuring environmental impact likely to be caused by projects. Fourth, principle of intergenerational equity. Man bears a solemn responsibility to protect and improve the environmental for present and future generations. 1972 Stockholm Declaration on the Human Environment, Principle 1. Ang tao daw o lalaki ay kayang gampanan ng seryoso o formal ang kanilang responsibilidad para maprotektahan at maiangat ang ating environment sa kasalukuyan at sa mga hinaharap. The principle of intergenerational equity states that every generation holds the earth in common with members of the present generation and with other generations, the past and the future. Fifth, principle of common but differentiated responsibility. Because developed states have contributed disproportionately financial and technological resources, those states have special responsibility in shouldering the burden of pursuing global sustainable development. Sarmiento, 2009. Dahil ang mga developed state ay nag-ambag ng walang katiyakang pampinansyal at technological resources, ang mga nakasad na yan ay may special na responsibilidad na pasanin or akuin para makamit ang global sustainable development na ninanais. Common but differentiated responsibilities. Principle of International Environmental Law establishing that all states are responsible for addressing global environmental destruction, yet not equally responsible. And last, principle on non-discrimination. Each state should ensure that its regime of environmental protection, when addressing pollution origination within the state, does not discrimination between pollution affected and the state and pollution affecting other states. Sarmiento, 2009. Based from Sarmiento, 2009, ang bawat estado daw ay kailangang siguraduhin na ang regime or pamahalaan ng environmental protection na kapag pinag-uusapan ang pollution origination sa estado ay walang diskriminasyon sa pagitan ng pollution affecting the state and pollution affecting the other states. The non-discrimination principle requires the equal treatment of an individual or group irrespective of their particular characteristic and is used to assess apparently neutral criteria that may produce effects which systematically disadvantage persons possessing those characteristics. We all have the right to be equally treated, regardless of our race, color, sex, nationality, or language religion. Now, let's proceed to standard of conduct. We have here strict liability theory. It is the states are under an absolute obligation to prevent pollution and are liable for its effect irrespective of fault. Shaw 2008. Based from Shaw 2008, ang estado ay nakapailalim sa isang ganap na obligasyon para pigilan ang polusyon and they are liable for its effective irrespective of fault, which does not depend on actual negligence or intent to harm. Strict liability exists when a defendant is liable for committing an action. Test of due diligence. It is a standard that is accepted generally as the most appropriate one. The test of due diligence undoubtedly imports an element of flexibility in the equation. It is also important to note that elements of remoteness and forcibility are parts of the framework of the liability of the states. The damage that occurs must have been caused by the pollution under consideration. Shaw 2008. Due diligence is an investigation, audit, or review performed to confirm facts or details of a matter under consideration in the financial world. Due diligence requires an examination of financial records before entering into a proposed transaction with another party. Long-range transboundary air pollution. Air pollution whose physical origin is situated wholly or in part within there are under the national jurisdiction of another state at such as a distance that is not generally possible to distinguish the contribution of individual emission sources of groups of sources. 1979 Convention on Long-Range Transboundary Air Pollution, Article 1B. The Convention on Long-Range Transboundary Air Pollution, often abbreviated as Air Convention, is intended to protect the human environment against air pollution and to gradually reduce and prevent air pollution, including long-range transboundary air pollution. Transboundary pollution is the pollution that originates in one country but is able to cause damage in another country's environment by crossing borders through pathways like water or air. Ito yung pollution na nagmula sa isang bansa at ang naapektuhan nito ay iba pang kalapit na bansa. There are the main bases of liability for transboundary pollution under international are as follows. First, an absolute duty to protect against harm from ultra-hazardous activities which, if violated, results in a state being held strictly liable. Second, the absolute right theory or the responsibility for negligent or international acts. And third, Good Neighbor Lines Principle, Sarmiento 2009.